Welcome everyone. I'm just gonna go through a little announcement real quick, CG, and then we'll get started with the wine and
Yep.
you in a little bit. But welcome everyone. Welcome to the last week, the last bottle of the Weirdo Pool Party box is the theme of this month, and then we're wrapping it all up with 2024 Delinquente Roxanne the Razor NND, which is what we have right here. Should be the last bottle you have in your box. If it's not, then you fucked up the order somehow along the way, but no biggie. Just a few announcements. The invoices for next month, I need to wrap that up. So if you are joining us next month, just go ahead and pay that. If you're not, just let us know or let me know just so that we can get that all set up. And in case you're wondering, next month's theme is going to be what I call Grape American Road Trip. So it's all the wines from kind of the other 47 states. No California, no Washington, no Oregon. It's like all the small states. So we got Texas, Michigan, Vermont, and Long Island. So it's kind of and I'm sure we're going to get into talking about this with you, CG, but with the tariffs and everything that's happening in this godforsaken fucking administration of our country, I think it was time to maybe highlight some of the domestic producers and then to see what's happening. Besides that, I don't really have any other announcement except, as most of you already know, 6 Foot Wine Club is committed to donating 1% of its gross revenue to an organization whose mission statement aligns with our values. And this month, we are donating to Food Rescue US. So if you want to donate alongside 6 Foot Wine Club, or you just want to learn more about what they do, the links are in the chat box. If not, that's totally cool too. Any questions about? Oh, one more thing. So July, in case you haven't noticed, July we have 5 Wednesdays. So next Wednesday there's no tasting. So we're gonna take a break next Wednesday, which is the 30th of July, and then we're gonna come back with the Great American Road Trip, starting on August 6th as our first tasting of that month. So just know that next week we have no tasting. We're taking a break, and then we'll be back on August 6th. Any questions about anything before we get into the wine and the man himself? Cool. Excellent. Because you're just joining us, we're tasting this guy today. This is a cool little label. 2024 Delinquente Wine Company Roxanne the Razor NND is what we're tasting today. But even more exciting than the wine itself, we have the winemaker himself, Gregoriou. I know it's a mouthful.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. But I believe you said last time you go by Cone Greg, CG, whatever it is here.
Yeah.
But yeah, the man himself.
I've answered to a lot worse in my time.
That's right. He's joining us for the second time. We featured his Rocco il Vagabondo, the Montepulciano, 3 years ago. And now he's back 3 years later with this delicious number today. But I thought initially I was going to maybe read through your bio for those folks who joined within the last 3 years, haven't seen your first appearance. I thought, why not just give you the room, the space to kind of give us a little background on who you are and where you're joining us from, and yeah, just a little quick background.
Absolutely, no worries. So, yeah, so my name's Con Greg. Delinquente Wine Company is a winery that I founded in 2013. So I've been doing this for a little while. We're a very small boutique wine company. We focus on making minimal intervention wines from southern Italian grape varieties grown in the Riverland in South Australia. So for the uninitiated or people that don't have a vast knowledge of Australian wine and wine growing regions, the South Australia is the biggest wine producing state in the country. It produces around about 40% of the total production in Australia. And it's the main wine regions that you may know are the Barossa Valley and McLaren Vale. Also, Clare Valley for Riesling, or the Adelaide Hills for cooler climate stuff. But where we are is perfect. Thank you very much. Is a region called the Riverland. It's inland, about 200 miles from the city of Adelaide, which is the capital city of our state. And because it's further inland, it's very, very hot, very dry. Where we are in South Australia has a very similar climate to southern and central California, Mediterranean sort of climate, hot, dry summers, mild winters. So, our winemaking does sort of have a lot of similarities to that. And the Riverland is really, for all intents and purposes, the bulk producing workhorse of the Australian wine industry. If the South Australia produces about 40% of Australia's total crush, just in those smaller little regions there, then the Riverland makes up about 40% of that. So it's the biggest wine producing region in the biggest wine producing state. All of the famous like critter wines, or cheaper bottles that you might know, or cask wines, Hardy's, all that sort of stuff originated in the Riverland. And it just happens to be where I grew up. So I grew up there, very, very small towns. We're on the banks of the Murray River, which is the biggest river system in Australia. It starts over on the east coast, halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, in what we call the Great Dividing Range, so the biggest sort of mountain system in Australia, and it winds its way down and it comes out just below Adelaide at the Murray mouth. So it's basically a bit of everywhere around that river is very much an agricultural region. So all along there it's used for irrigation. So in the Riverland, it's not just grapes, it's big citrus industry, so oranges, lemons, grapefruit, that sort of stuff. Olives, all varieties of nuts, stone fruit, all that sort of thing. So it is really a lifeblood of sort of southeastern inland Australia, and it's a pretty nice place to grow up. On the Murray, you're in the nature. It's sort of can be quite idyllic. It's a long way away from the city, so and the city of Adelaide is very small. So has a remoteness to it, but it's also got a lot of industry, and it's got a good connection through the wine industry to global trade. So that's a nice thing as well. Having grown up in the Riverland and grown up on a vineyard, my family's been in the wine industry for a long time. Basically, since they immigrated to Australia in the 50s, they started growing things. And I didn't really want to, personally, I didn't have really any interest in getting into the wine industry, particularly in the Riverland. It's not the most glamorous industry to in the world. It's huge, humongous factory wineries making low quality, high quantity wine. So it didn't really have any appeal to me. But I suppose working within restaurants and within the hospitality industry, and sort of seeing, being exposed to minimal intervention natural wines through my early 20s, sort of sparked an interest in wine. And then after doing a bit of that, I actually went home and did a vintage at one of the big wineries to get a bit of extra cash. And it was at that time that the first crop of these new sort of unknown grape varieties were starting to come into the winery. So obviously Australia is known for Shiraz and Chardonnay and Cabernet, the sort of the classics that we do and have done in the past in our own way. But the Riverland is not really suited to those varieties. It's very hot. These varieties need a lot of irrigation to keep them alive during the growing season. And because of all that irrigation, they grow much bigger yields and the quality is just not there. And so what happened in sort of the mid 2000s, 04, 05, we had a massive glut of wine in Australia. Basically, all of those, critter wines, the really cheap wines that were being sent particularly to the US and to Europe, those markets that were plowing through them through the 90s just basically turned off. We've had enough of these wines. They're not interesting. They don't suit what we want to drink anymore. And so growers like my dad, who was getting paid $1,000 a ton for his Chardonnay in the 90s, turned around in the early 2000s and they were getting paid $200 a ton, which is much below the cost of production. So there are a few small growers that decided to try and do something different. They looked to climates around the world that were similar to where we are in the Riverland. And of particular interest was southern Italy. Again, very hot, very dry. What grape varieties thrive there? Naturally grow without irrigation, produce really, really good quality fruit, know how to keep their yields at a good level while still having lots and lots of flavor, but again, without that high alcohol. So varieties like Nero d'Avola, Montepulciano, Vermentino started to be planted at that time. As that fruit started coming into the winery for the first sort of crop or two, I just happened to be a cellar hand, pumping wine around and get exposed to it. So that vintage was 2012. And in between doing pump overs on, 25,000, 50,000 litre tanks and processing, 400 tonne a night, I was also doing hand plunging 1 ton ferments of Montepulciano and doing lee stirring on barrel fermented Vermentino and stuff like that the winemaker at this winery was playing around with. And sort of being exposed to those wines, tasting those wines and those varieties was sort of a light bulb moment for me. It was sort of, I say it's like the center of the Venn diagram where my home and my region and a place that I feel, connected to and passionate about maybe could make the wine that I like to drink. And as a 25-year-old with no winemaking experience other than being a cellar hand for my whole life and growing up on a vineyard, I asked if I could make a little bit of wine and play around and do some stuff. And in 2013, I launched Delinquente. Started with 2 wines, Vermentino and Montepulciano, and have slowly sort of grown from there. So that's sort of the background of the winery. Again, being quite young at the time, and natural wine in Australia was almost non-existent, really, and it was still very old school in the styles of wines that people were drinking and selling, and the approach that most restaurants and retailers had. I had no, ties or reason to want to try and make a business out of this. I just wanted to have some fun. So I wanted to do, my idea was to just do it the complete opposite. Whatever anyone told me to do, I'd do the opposite. Whatever was on the shelf or whatever was being marketed, I would do the absolute opposite. So I came up with a dumb name, Delinquente Wine Company. It's just delinquent, sort of inspired by Zoolander and Derelict. I thought that was really funny at the time. Now I'm sort of I'm questioning that decision a little bit, but and I got a friend of mine who's an artist and a graphic designer to come up with these labels, and I said, mate, the name is Delinquente. You're the biggest delinquent I know. I want you to come up with a wine label that doesn't look like a wine label. Absolute, complete opposite, like nothing. No reason to put it on there. Let's do something. And so he developed all these characters and their backstories and the whole idea. And for me, it stood out and was a perfect representation of what I wanted to do. And off we went. And if you didn't like it, that's fine. If you like it, that's great. And it just so happened that, at that time, over the course of the next 5-10 years, natural wine in Australia became more well known. weirder labels started coming in from Europe, and people were taking inspiration from that, and we just happened to ride that wave, and off it goes. So now, you know, we make 8 wines in the Delinquente range. There's four hell wines. We do a pet nat in a can. You know, we have Bizarro, which is our aperitivo range. We're exporting to 16 different countries. The US is our biggest market outside of Australia, in 15 or 16 states there. And it's done its thing.
Amazing. Amazing.
Cool.
You know, it's like the old saying of, you know, the road less traveled, going the direction that no one else is going. It definitely makes you kind of stand out, and even just your label alone. Like, this is definitely attention grabbing for sure. If you're browsing through the aisles of a wine store, this is something that definitely grabs your attention, which I think I don't know. You're saying you're second guessing your choice of name and maybe a label design, but I think it's fucking great. I think
if I was to do it now, I don't think I would. If it didn't exist and I was to do 20 now, I would. You know, I've got kids. I've got it's a different, it's a different situation. I wouldn't do something so far out there. Probably.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Like I said, I was 25. I had no reason for even wanting it to work. I didn't care. I thought if I could sell a couple of cartons and sell the rest of my mates, whatever. I didn't have no intention. I just wanted to make something funny and cool. And it just so happened that it was a bit of right place at the right time, and it did connect with people that felt the same way, that wanted
absolutely
to get into wine and to drink wine that wasn't so stuffy, that connected with them.
Exactly.
And that's I think the same for a lot of minimal intervention natural wine producers or smaller producers that make wines that sit in this price point. We want it to connect to people and have one connect, on a daily basis in an easy, approachable way, without it being this thing. So for a pool party,
from the beginning, I think one of the things that you Australian winemakers have done, or industry have done an incredible job, is kind of branding yourself as this kind of a fun wine people, like wine beverages, right? I mean, even, I mean, you can talk about how you feel about this particular brand, but like even Yellowtail, right? Like putting a kangaroo on top, like putting an animal on the label and then making it look with a colorful animal on the label, and then pushing it on the label where, at the time, US and other places, the wine labels are just so gothic, like just so pomp and, very, very classic and rigid. So I think it ties into this idea of, Australia as a whole is like we're experimental, we're playing with different things. We don't necessarily play by the rigid rules of the old world. We kind of do our own thing. And I think that ties all into the story of Delinquente and how you got started and all of that. So I think it's a perfect representation of what you do.
Aside from the fact that, we're a tiny winery and they're a behemoth, the idea of Australian wine, I did a set, like a similar sort of thing with a winemaker called from Yalumba. So the chief wine, chief wine Yalumba, right? And humongous winery, humongous brand. Me, tiny winery, tiny brand. And at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff we were saying was exactly the same thing. The style of wine that we make, we want to make wines that are refreshing, wines that go really, really well with food, wines that suit sort of an al fresco, outdoor sort of lifestyle. And so whilst Yellowtail may not necessarily make those wines, how they are marketed and perceived sort of comes into that. And you're exactly right. Putting a tattooed face on a label isn't that much different than putting a kangaroo on a label, really, other than 30 years. That's the only difference. So, it makes sense.
Totally. Just out of curiosity, does your dad still grow grapes? Is your dad still, your family still in the business?
Yeah. So dad grows grapes in the Riverland. He's sort of got slightly fewer vineyards than what he did when I was younger, but he's actually he was running wineries in the Riverland for a long time, very big wineries. That was his main, job.
Yeah.
And about the time I started Delinquente, he started his own business as a contract bottling company. And it was weird because, you know, at the same time we started, his business is located about a 10-minute drive from mine. And he does all of my bottling for me. But, you know, the success of Delinquente is mirrored by his success, but like 10 times larger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's like doing like 400 containers a year, you know, all this sort of stuff, and absolutely killing it. So, you know, having the background and the you know, expertise specifically in the Riverland, but I suppose how do you take that and market it to the world? We've taken two completely different paths, but it's worked really well. So, yeah, I'm as proud of my old man as I am of what we do.
Excellent. Does he like what does he think about your style of winemaking? So minimal intervention. I mean, I'm sure he comes from a completely different school of thought.
Yeah. As an example, like the first label we made, it had Riverland on the label, and he looked at me and said, "Why would you put Riverland on the label? No one knows the Riverland. No one likes the Riverland. You just put South Australia on the label, which is what you're allowed to do." And I was like, well, that's sort of the point. And that's at that point, I think he saw where I was going with it and where he would go with it. And from then on, he, and I think when he saw over maybe a 4 or 5 year period that it was working, he sort of stepped back and he stopped giving me as much advice. He still likes to give me advice, don't get me wrong, as every old man should. But yeah, I think he sees where I'm going with it and why it's sort of different and doing its own thing.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize this until I was doing research for tonight's call. But yeah, you're kind of a comparison of Riverland to like Central Southern California. I think is really incredible because I had no idea. I knew South Australia made a lot of wine, but I didn't know that bulk of that came from Riverland. That Riverland was such a big player in kind of like the commodity mass market wine of Australia. So
yeah, if you think of it like the Riverland, you've got to work in opposites. So obviously, as you go further north in Australia, in South Australia, it's the same as going south in California.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Riverland is sort of more akin to something like the Central Valley or around there. And as you go further south into like, you know, the Coonawarra or the Adelaide Hills or these sort of cooler places, that's sort of getting more Northern California, Sonoma, that sort of area. And then if you go further south in Australia in general, down into Victoria or even Tasmania, that's where you get into the much cooler regions, you know, which would be similar to your Oregons or Washington State. So the only difference I would say is if, you know, it's the same, but on a smaller scale. So the amount of wine produced in California is probably, I don't know, but I'd say like probably 10 times more than what's produced in South Australia. But it's the same, but mirrored, but much smaller.
Right. And, you know, the fact that you are doing something like this in a place like Riverland is what makes me appreciate it even more, you know, because I'm sure your neighbors are kind of looking at you, but like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Like, you know,
there's a little bit of that. It's such a big industry in the Riverland. It makes so much wine. We are a speck of sand in the beach of, you know, of Riverland wine. So, and we play in a completely different market. Most people in the Riverland don't even know Delinquente.
Yeah,
they have no idea that it exists. You know, they might have heard of these other varieties being planted and whatever, but it's really not on their radar. And the reason being is that the people, it's changed over the last probably 20 or 30 years. It used to be a lot of smaller growers, and again, a lot of immigrant, you know, Southern European immigrants that started farms and whatever. They've all been bought out by the multinational corporations, by the treasuries, by the, you know, Hardys, et cetera, et cetera. So by the Pernod Ricards, you know, that sort of things. So
cool. All right. Well,
It's
you're breaking up. You broke up a little bit at the end. Was it last
nothing.
thing Okay. Are there a lot of now that you've mentioned there were some kind of influx of these Southern Italian varieties that are coming in? Is that becoming more popular in Riverland? Are there more people planting and making wines from these Italian varieties? Or are they still sticking with a lot of the Shiraz, Cabernet, Chardonnay, and all
For the most part, they're sticking with the classics. It's a very small part of the Riverland. But having said that, from the higher end side of things, in restaurants and bars and independent retail in Australia, there is a huge interest in what we would call alternative varieties, particularly Italian varieties, because it's not just a Riverland that they grow well in. I mean, McLaren Vale is a coastal, warm, temperate region. You drive through McLaren Vale, you could believe you're in Sicily. It really does look very similar. So Nera d'Avola from McLaren Vale is incredible, beautiful, and very, very high end, very good stuff. They're planting Nerello Mascalese in the Adelaide Hills now, that sort of thing. So on volcanic soils down in Coonawarra, like it's across the board and across the country. These varieties are really, really well suited, and because they, as opposed to Shiraz and Cabernet, which needs to get to higher alcohols to get the tannins and the phenolics to ripen up. These varieties have that lovely tannin ripeness at a lower sugar level. So they tend to suit that sort of moderate alcohol, fresher style that is what people are tending to drink a little bit more of, which is why they've come in and worked really well. It's harder to make a lightweight, fresh Shiraz that doesn't taste green, but the Nera d'Avola, easy, totally fine.
Yeah.
So it's not only is it suiting our climate and our growing regions in Australia, it's also suiting our palates really well.
Perfect. Well, now that we've been talking about these varieties, let's talk about this actual bottle itself. Roxanne and the Razor NND. I assume NND is for Negro Amaro Nera d'Avola. Yeah?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
It was like in Australia we do a GSM, which is Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvedre. So I was like, this is a blend. I'll just make up my own GSM, idea. So it was NND. Predominantly Negro Amaro with some Nera d'Avola thrown in there as well. So the fruit for these two varieties is grown on the Bashan Vineyard in Barmera, so which is a 5-minute drive from where I grew up. Certified organic and biodynamic vineyard, and has been for about 20 years. So really, really great vineyard. It's quite uncommon to have biodynamics in the Riverland and organics, even though with the lower rainfall and the way that the grapes are grown, higher trellising, all that sort of stuff, it's perfectly suited for organic farming. But you really see, I think the quality of the fruit come through in the wines that we make from this vineyard, which is most of the wines. There's the depth of flavor, there's that brightness, there's that really well balanced acidity, but there is also underlying tannin ripeness and a little bit of structure there as well, which I think is really, really important. With this wine, we do very short maceration. So we bring it into the winery. We don't do any whole bunch. We don't do any carbonic. We just bring it in full crush into stem on skins in open fermenters, and we leave it on skins for about 5 days. So usually it's about halfway through ferment at that point. We pick it nice and early, so when it comes into the winery, it's around about that 11.5 to 12% potential alcohol level. But we pick separately. So the Negro Amaro ripens much earlier than the Nero d'Avola. It's got more of an opaque skin. It's got less canopy, and it doesn't handle the heat as well as Nero d'Avola. Nero d'Avola is like the Terminator of vines. You can't kill it. It like, even if it looks like it's scraggly and losing canopy or whatever, you climb in, you look at the fruit, and it's vibrant, it's fresh, it's got great acidity. So we tend to let the Nero d'Avola, well, it ripens a little bit later and we pick it a lot later. But we try and get it for this wine at around that 12% potential alcohol mark. So short maceration.
That's interesting. So what you mentioned, because when I was tasting this wine first, I know this is mostly Negro Amaro, so 70% Negro Amaro, 30% Nero d'Avola. I get that kind of like the body power, kind of like the strength of Negro Amaro, but really the aromatics and like really poppy, bright red fruit, all of that. Like what I get more of it is actually Nero d'Avola, even though there's less of it in here. The actual aromatic profile is much more Nero d'Avola than Negro Amaro, which now hearing you explain that makes sense because you pick Negro Amaro just much earlier than the Nero d'Avola just kind of hang much longer to develop all of it.
The interesting thing about blending these two, picking the Negro Amaro earlier means it's a lot leaner and it's a lot more neutral.
Yeah.
So what happens is when you add the Nero d'Avola in, even if it's only 20 or 30%, it completely changes the wine, and it just, like you said, pops with aromatics. And I think it brings those flavors and those profiles out of the Negro Amaro as much as adding it in itself. So that's why it really dominates and takes over, that sort of cherry cola, like, brightness and juiciness. And then what you get left from the Negro Amaro is that lovely bitterness, that little bit of aniseedy, like earthy sort of bitter character, which balances out the fruit really nicely, because it's not tannin, but it's got that sort of peppery, spicy, like mouthfeel thing happening, which I think is really important. I like bright, juicy wines, but I don't like just fruit bombs. I don't want to drink fruit juice. I want to drink wine. So it's got to have that little bit of savoriness and structure there to balance it out. And that's what the Negro Amaro actually brings to the table, is that little bit of peppery, like aniseedy bitterness, which is really cool.
And it's also a whole cluster, right? When you come in, you crush the whole thing. You leave it on the stems as well for 5 days, right?
No. So we'll crush and destem the whole lot. So we will completely macerate. The Nero d'Avola holds up well. Like the berries tend to go through the destemmer really well, but the Negro Amaro is actually like a bigger berry, softer skin. So that generally gets like fully macerated. The Nero d'Avola will go through his whole berries a lot more, and you get that sort of slightly carbonic feel from the whole berry aspect. But also by pressing it off while it's still fermenting, it's sort of like halfway to rosé, which is why you get the brightness and the freshness, and the tannin and structure doesn't overpower the wine.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant, especially knowing how hot it gets over there. The fact that you are able to produce a 11%, light skin, high poppy, acid driven, while not lacking any of the kind of like the hallmarks of Negro Amaro as well as Nero d'Avola all in here. Like you kind of feel the kind of the body. There's some tannin on here as well, but it's just really lifted. It's just like really light on its feet, which is really nice.
So the Riverland invariably, for the most part, is like sandy loam soils. This site is on an ancient, there's a small lake close by, but it used to be, prehistorically much bigger. So there is a limestone subsoil and a richness to the soil, which has, I think, been enhanced by the biodynamics over the last 20 years. So it does have that almost like terracotta-y, Terra Rossa style, like redness in the soil, which is really cool, but it's still sandy. So you get the lovely drainage and you're getting more of the aromatics from the fruit because of that. Also, it's flat, lots of sunlight, simple soils. So the varieties tend to be showcased really well. There's less aspects, less influence from terroir, the varieties shine through really nicely.
Yeah, I just want to show this picture to kind of show you what CG is talking
Yeah, I mean,
about. It's
that's
kind of sandy. Yeah, this is a young lad 3 years ago.
Yeah. Look at that. More hair.
But is it what is this? What's growing here to the right of it?
Neridavula.
That's Naradavla. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's Neridavula. So you can see like how much canopy it has.
Yeah.
So what we do is we'll hand prune everything right back, but then let the canopy grow, because that canopy is what protects the fruit. So when it's 100 degrees, 105 degrees, every day for 2 weeks on end, that canopy, you get in under there and it is 20 degrees cooler. Perfect ripening temperature for the Neridavula. And Neridavula, actually, as a variety, tends to really bunch up under the main cane. So it's even further protected. You don't tend to get too much at the top or the bottom. So, which is why it's brilliant. And that's the way we grow it like that. 2 trellises, so like quite high off the ground. 2 trellises, and then like 1 on each one, growing in each direction. So lots of airflow, again, to keep it cooler. Any wind that comes through and comes underneath helps to move the air around and keep the fruit a bit cooler. But that canopy is really important.
Oh, sorry. What happened? There you go. Oh, sorry, I'm having a. Stop. Sure. Okay, there you go. Cool. How much do you think that, I mean, what you describe is kind of like a South Australia's signature soil type, right? Like that red clay, loamy sand over limestone. Like how much influence do you think that soil type has in the expression of your wine, right? That's another thing, right? Like these grape varieties grow in southern Italy, in Sicily, and other parts, but they're not necessarily growing in the same soil type.
No.
So what
it tends to be, well, it tends to be a little bit rockier, like clayier in parts. So that's why most of the time, your Neridavula from the Riverland is going to be lighter, a little more aromatic, compared to a Neridavula from Sicily, which is going to be a little bit denser, a little bit chewier, higher tannin, higher alcohol. It's also the way that the grapes are grown. So, having those double trellis and the big canopy means that we tend to produce a slightly higher yield than what you would find in a premium region, or particularly in like where you get like really great Neridavula from in Sicily, where they're probably growing and producing much less per acre. So that also influences the style. Having that higher yield means that we're sacrificing a little bit of like seriousness. So you play into the style of wine, you play into what, is the strengths of the vineyard. So you make lighter, fresher styles that showcase the aromatics really well, have a lower alcohol, have that higher acidity, pick it a little bit earlier. So that sandiness, the way the grapes are grown, and just the nature of where we are, like I said, being flat and very, very sunny, you're always going to get primary fruit, and you get primary fruit early. Yeah. And the beautiful thing about these varieties, as opposed to Shiraz and Cabernet, particularly, like I said earlier, is that you get tannin ripeness at an even rate with your sugar ripeness. So you at 12% potential alcohol, you look at it, it's got great acid, it's got heaps of fruit, but the tannins aren't green. And that's something that's really, really important with these wines. If you want to have a lighter, fresher, poolside, super fruity, fun, juicy style, you don't want it to be a fruit bomb with then like a real harsh green tannin underneath it. You want it to be like, in balance. So that's why it works well.
Yeah, amazing. So just to finish out the production that you were talking about, so five day maceration, quick right off. In the open top fermenter, then I assume that you go into stainless steel and then vinify separately and then blend later.
So, everything's vinified separately. Once we press it off, it ferments to dry in tank, rack it off, keep it separate. I like to chill it down and just sort of get out some of the tartrates and that sort of stuff. And then basically about 2 months after we pick it, it's ready to go into bottle. So we'll do our blending trials, get it the right levels that we want, make sure it's it's in the zone that we want it to be, and then we get into bottle. So we pick Negro Amaro is usually late February ish. This year it was more mid-February. Neradavila is usually in March. This year it was late February, very, very hot. But 24 was a more mild year, so we were picking that sort of more around mid-March. Then we bottle first week of May. First week of June, last week of May, first week of June. And then we tend to start sending wine out within a month of that. So we're coming to release the 25s in Australia next week. And the 25 Roxanne is on the is ready to go. And I think we've sent a first shipment to the States. It's on the water now. So
cool. I'm actually surprised that I'm not getting any more like a dissolved CO2 here, knowing that how quickly it was bottled. It was like 3 months, you said, right? And all stainless steel. I expected there to be like a little more dissolved CO2 here. It's good.
Yeah. Like it still has plenty of time to settle out. It's a quick turnaround from racking and into bottle. So we do let it is in tank, finished mailer, and because the harvest in South Australia in general is March, April, May. Right. For the Barossa Valley, for the Adelaide Hills, whereas in the Riverland, because we're further inland, it's a little bit hotter. We're generally speaking February, March. So the wines are in tank and sugar dry in March when it's still really warm. So Malos go through real quick. If you're picking in the Adelaide Hills, Pinot Noir, end of May, by the time you pick it and get it through sugar ferment, it's might be end of May, June, and it's cold. It's winter. So Malos might not even go through. They might start up again in springtime. Whereas for us, Malos kick through real quick. And we tend to have like the winery packed down, everything put away in oak and stainless steel by end of March. So it means that it does still have a couple months to settle out, figure itself out, particularly wines like Montepulciano and Neradavila that have a little bit higher tannin. They need time to just balance themselves. And then once they do, that they go into bottle without that little bit of like fizziness.
Cool. And I assume, do you filter this wine? Filter, no fining, probably?
No, we just rack it off twice. So we'll rack it ready for bottle, then we'll rack it into the bottling line. So, or into the tanker to take it to the bottling line. So it looks really nice and clear. It does all that lovely, you get that nice pop to it. And like I said, I do that little bit of, because we use temperature controlled tanks. I don't add any bentonite or anything like that, but I do chill it down. So it drops out a lot of the tartrates. So you're not left with like crunchy chunkiness at the bottom of the bottle.
Yep. Cold stabilize before you put it out.
Yeah, pretty much, basically.
Cool. Well, I think this wine is delicious. I think this is a perfect thing for this month's theme, which is I didn't tell you actually, but it's what I'm calling Weirdo Pool Party. It's just like the wines that are just kind of like outside of the box, on its, doing its own thing, kind of category defying thing. Like, I don't know where to put this. And I thought this was like that perfect thing. It's delicious. If you just want to pound it by the poolside, you totally can. But if you want to like sit there and geek out on it, you'll be like, wait a minute, like what's happening here? Like, why does this Southern Italy, but it's from Australia, like really one of the hottest parts of Australia? Like, what is happening here? And it's
what you just said is basically the raison d'etre of Delinquente. It's if you want to just drink and don't think, we're here for you. But if you want to look into it and you want to delve a little bit deeper, there's a really nice, there's something there for you. And you're going to be able to get something really weird and unique and yummy and delicious and strange, but at an affordable price. That's where we want to be. That's exactly the idea for Delinquente. So,
Perfect.
For that.
Perfect. Well, I have a bunch more questions I can ask, but I also wanted to give some space for other folks to ask you any questions. But before that, honestly, by the way, does everybody like this wine? I know we have the winemaker on, but it's a any feedback on the wine, even if you don't like it. These are all constructive feedback. Well, good, excellent. Does anybody have questions for CG so far of anything that he's gone over about the wine itself, or Riverland, or Chalia, or anything else? Oh, that's all shy, huh? All right. Well, I'll continue to ask you some questions then. Sorry, David, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I put a comment in the chat. Like, what I find really interesting about this wine is how you sip it changes what taste you get a lot, for me at least. Like, if you just take a quick sip and swallow it down, like, it tastes one way, but if you kind of sniff it, swirl it, swish around in the mouth a little bit, it tastes completely different in my mind. So I think that's kind of cool.
With the shorter maceration, like I said, it's sort of halfway to rose. Like, it's a dark. So if you don't get the oxygen in there, it does have that almost like neutral, quite steely, like reserved sort of feel. But if you get the oxygen in there, and like you said, you swirl it around, you swish it around your mouth, that's when those aromatics start coming out, and where that bitterness and that nice sort of the fruit starts coming through as well. So it's definitely one of those things where people chill it, they put it in the fridge, they serve it like cold, right, straight from the fridge, and it almost tastes like nothing. It's just hot day, great, that's perfect, that's fine. But if you serve it at cellar temp, and you get into it, you move it around, you get the oxygen in there, it actually develops really, really well, and it shows the varieties, and it ends up becoming like a really fantastic food wine. So, you think something lighter like this might not stand up, but because it's Negro Amaro and Nero d'Avola, you throw this. My buddy's a chef, and he loves to serve this wine with he does like a duck ragu with gnocchi, right? A little bit rich, a little bit fatty. You get the flavor there, and the sort of the spice and the bitterness to stand up to the food, but you also get the acid to cut through it really nicely. So, it does. It can be, like I said before, it can be super simple, nice and cold. Drink it, don't think, whatever. But yeah, if you get into it, it definitely starts talking.
Yeah, it really reminds me of like some of the lighter Beaujolais we have a lot, like that kind of great poppy bubblegum flavor that can kind of go with a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, initially I thought there were some carbonic on here as well when I first tasted it. I'm like, is there some carbonic?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, is this all Beaujolais style carbonic?
We've played around, and we do a little bit of Nero d'Avola under carbonic maceration for some other wines that we make, much smaller production. The thing with these varieties at this sugar level or this sort of ripeness, while the tannins are ripe, the stems aren't. So the stems are really green. And if you have too much exposure to the stems, then it really it takes it into that real capsicum-y weird zone. Some people love, but I don't love, so I don't tend to do it. But we've definitely played around. I've done carbonic maceration with pretty much every red variety that we work with, to trial it and see how it works. And it works the best with Nero d'Avola, but it's got to be more around that 13 to 14% potential alcohol. And it's a different wine. It really, you get more of that more pungent earthiness and more of that funk, which isn't necessarily what I want to see in this one.
Also, since I have a winemaker on here, I meant to ask. This is a question that has been on my mind for a while, and also on some of my wine club members' mind a while. But we're wondering, why do we not see any white carbonic maceration?
It's pretty uncommon. I actually have a friend of mine that does. There's a winery in the Adelaide Hills called BK Wines.
Okay.
So he does full carbonic Chardonnay,
Okay.
which is really cool. The thing is, invariably when you're doing carbonic with white, what you're going to get is you're going to extract tannin, and you're going to extract that little bit more spice and structure without extracting heaps of color.
Okay.
Particularly depending on the variety that you work with and depending on your oxygen exposure. But because it's carbonic, there isn't any oxygen, and oxygen is what makes an orange wine orange, right? It's not just a skin contact, it's exposure to oxygen. That's what it's oxidation, right?
Mhm.
So you get you have a white wine that looks white, but then tastes like a little bit more tastes like tannin and grippy in structure. And it's something that, hey, who knows? We might find in a few years' time you get like a wave of it because it's really interesting and cool. But it's something that doesn't necessarily really fit anywhere at the moment. So I don't think many people are doing it.
Wait, so maybe my understanding of carbonic is wrong here, but why do you extract more phenolics and tannin and all of that with carbonic? I thought you get less of that.
You get less of it when compared to making a red wine, but you get more of it when you compare to making a white wine. If you're bringing the fruit,
oh yeah, because a white wine you completely get rid of all that. Yeah,
there's no skin contact whatsoever. But within those berries, the juice that's starting to ferment and macerate the skins is in contact with the skins, but it's not in contact with oxygen, so it stays white. It's cool.
Like orange.
It would be cool.
Yeah, orange, but that's not orange. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And obviously, it's not going to have much tannin and structure as an orange wine because that would be more comparable to a red wine.
Yeah.
But you're going to have it there, I've never done it before, but I feel like it might not make sense. It might add layers of complexity that don't jive with a white wine. So it might be a little bit confronting. Okay. This Chardonnay that he makes, I like. Look it up, Skin and Bones.
I know. Now I really want to try this. I gotta hunt this down. I've been wanting to find it's gotta exist, carbonic white. Somebody must have tried it, and then I just couldn't find it anywhere. Like I don't know anybody who makes white carbonic.
I can't think of any other one. I can't think of any other ones.
Is it good?
I like it, yeah. But I'm a BK Wines fanboy. I'll drink and I love his wines. If honestly, my favorite Australian wine producer. If you can find bottles in where you guys are, I'm not sure if it's distributed there, but look it up. Brendan Keys, New Zealand couple from New Zealand that moved to the Adelaide Hills 20 years ago and started making. They make Burgundy level Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the Adelaide Hills for a quarter of the price. It's phenomenal stuff.
Did you say Brennan and Keys?
Brendan Keys. Brendan
Keys. Okay. All right. I'll look it up.
So sorry if this is too many questions about his carbonic Chardonnay, but do you get, in addition to the sort of skin contact tannin thing, do you also get high tone, bright fruit?
That's the thing, right? So you get the Chardonnay is probably a good one because it's a little bit more subdued. It'd be weird doing it with Sauvignon Blanc or an aromatic variety. So it's a little bit more in balance. And to be fair, I don't know how long it's under carbonic. I don't know if he leaves it for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it is. But you definitely, it tastes like a spicier, spicier, crunchier Chardonnay. So it just adds another layer of interest on top of a Chardonnay. If you were wanting to drink Chardonnay, I wouldn't drink it. But if you want to drink something, if you're open to something interesting and different for your bottle for the night, that's cool, and it really does something fun. But it doesn't make it too much tannin and structure. It just adds that nice little layer of spice on top, which is why you couldn't put it on a wine list as Chardonnay, right? If you put it on a wine list as Chardonnay in a restaurant and someone picked it and they got presented that wine, they'd be like, "What the fuck is this? It's not Chardonnay." Like, that, which is probably why it hasn't been done that much. But if you know what you're getting and you're interested in getting it, then yeah, it works really well. It's cool.
Okay. Cool. Amazing. I'll definitely look that up.
I have a question about production, but actually about distribution, because we drank your wine before, and I always get really excited when I see your labels in the most random places. And I actually think that is something that has happened. I'm familiar with it maybe, and so I see it and it makes me smile. Like, there's some stores, random stores in DC that carry it, but then I was visiting my dad in Hollywood, or Fort Lauderdale, and there was a restaurant that had it like on, its shelf, and I was very excited. I was like, "Oh my gosh, how did I get there?" So I think, you were mentioning earlier when you first started about how, like, if you had it all over to do again, would you make them crazy labels or whatever, or would you even be doing it this way? All of that. And I guess the question that I have is, like, what was the thought process about finding your distributor? Like, what is the sale that they're making? Like, I mean, you're all like, there's a vibe that you get with your bottles, like, without even opening it, it's going to be something different. So I'm just sort of like curious about that side of the business too. Like, when you were looking for a distributor, how did you find it? And I will say that the restaurant that we went to is one of the best in Fort Lauderdale. And it's a little off the wall itself, right? It's not like everybody else's restaurant. So obviously there's some thinking behind it, and I'm just curious.
You flatter me by saying that there's some thinking behind it, because there wasn't any thinking behind it. It was just do what I wanted to do. But so it's one of those things with the wine industry, which I think is, particularly in the US and particularly as an exporter to the US, the layers between the winery and the shop or the restaurant, there's so many people in between, right?
Yeah.
So we have an importer into the US, and they buy wine from me, right? And then they sell it to distributors in each state, because your importer can't be your distributor. It's a 3-tiered system. Yeah. So the distributor then sells it to the shop or the restaurant, to the wine buyer at the restaurant. The wine buyer at the restaurant then says, "Hey, this is on the list now," and your sommeliers and your servers in that restaurant are the ones then talking to you about the wine. So there are like 4 people, and God knows what's being passed on about the wine between one to the next, whether it's accurate. I've had times where it's like, that was what that wine was 5 years ago. It's different varieties now. Like, it's crazy. So having that vibe, unbeknownst to me when I started, I didn't go into it with doing a marketing plan, coming up with ideas for it. But what now in hindsight is that vibe is so important. If you can communicate the vibe of the wine and the vibe of the winery and what you're trying to do through the artwork on the bottle, and the artwork resonates with what's in the bottle and with the people that are drinking it and where they're drinking it in the setting, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's, at the park or someone's barbecue in their backyard, whatever it is, that vibe is more important than who your distributor is and who your importer is and who the restaurant is. The vibe is the thing that carries through the most. And it sounds dumb. That sounds so stupid, but it's true. Like, it actually is the case.
Album covers matter, man.
What's that? Sorry?
Album covers matter.
Yeah, of course. Of course. And that was a big part of it. Like, for me, I'm at the end of the day, I'm a wannabe rock star. I still have a drum kit and a guitar and amp set up in my house that I never use. But yeah, right. So for me, it's like, this is a chance to create something that I'm not talented enough to create musically. I can create something that has that same vibe in something that I know how to do. And so the big part of it when we were coming up with the labels was, like taking way more inspiration from album artwork than it was from any wine label or any packaging that had existed. Music's a huge part of the Delinquente story and idea. So absolutely, an album cover is so important, and so is it for a wine.
Yeah, as someone who judges American wine entirely by their font choice, I get it.
Well, you've heard it here. Vibe check, very important. I wanted to ask you a few questions, and I know I want to be respectful for your time, CG. I know it's an hour, but we're going into a little bit longer than an hour at this point. But if you're okay, open to it, I would like to ask you a couple more questions, if okay.
Yeah.
I mean, about wines, but less about the actual geeky side of the wine, but more of the just different things about wine. But one, since you are an Australian producer, I gotta ask you, and I didn't get to ask you last time because you ran out of time. But what are your feelings on screw caps? Like, do wines age under screw caps? How do you feel about screw caps?
Well, as an Australian, it's my birthright to love and believe in screw caps. So I'm all for it. Having said that, the romance and the the showmanship of cork and and all of that, I still love as well. For the style of wines, for the Delinquente wines that we make, screw caps are perfect choice. If it was me and I was making higher end stuff, like really high end wines, I would still bottle under cork. I think it's probably less about the technical side of things because that's not my specialty, but more about the vibe side of things. And I think that wine is is one of those few things in the world that is as it was hundreds of years ago, right? Wine is still made from grapes by a person, if you're talking about good wine, made from grapes by a person who's trying to convey a sense of place. And there's not many things in the world nowadays that do that. So if it was me and I was doing, like I said, higher end wine or whatever, I would want to keep that romance and keep that energy and that history, and I would continue to bottle under cork. Would I choose maybe an agglomerate type, product like a Vink or Dahan or something like that? Probably, because I don't want to waste wine, but unnecessarily. But for me, that's what keeps me. That's the thing about wine that keeps me interested in continuing to want to do this forever. Is it's something that's very, very unique in a modern world, and I would urge not so much a distrust, but a distaste for cork. I would urge away from that. Let's love it. If you get a wacky bottle, that's what happens. That's life. Don't get upset. Move on. Having said that, for Delinquente, screw caps all the way. We got to go. Poof. You don't want to drink it all tonight. It's fine. It'll last you another couple of days. Yeah, 100%.
Love it. Somebody who owns a wine label called Delinquente. Yeah, so the romantic deep down. Love it. Love it, CG. Also, yeah. So it's been 3 years since you were on the call last, and overall you are on your 12th vintage, right? 2025 would have been your 12th vintage. This point, you've been at this for a while at this point. So I wanted to ask you, what are, if you're to pick your favorite mistake, favorite failure along the way? Something, what I mean by that, something that at the time seemed maybe detrimental, so crushing, but in the end, the long term, looking back on it retrospectively, that taught you the most and that allowed you to grow the most as a winemaker, as a brand, however you see it. What would that be?
I think probably maybe 2 or 3 years in, I wanted making these wines. I had the idea to make the Hell wines, which is our like slightly more experimental, much smaller production, really sort of interesting, different wines, and bringing in doing some more skin contact on whites and playing around with stuff. And the first time I made those wines, had no real experience making that sort of style. I made 2 barrels of skin contact Bianco d'Alessano, which I like post vintage, post ferment. I blew my mind. I was like, this is the best fucking wine I've ever made. I love this. This is so good. This is going to change the world, right? This is what's going on in my mind. And I was like, all right, well, hands off winemaking. I'm just going to leave that and I'll come back to it later. And 3 months later, probably more like 5 months later in springtime, I was like, all right, got to start thinking about bottling this wine. Look at it. And I remember I can't see through mouse. Like mouse really affects me. And this was the mousiest wine I'd ever had in my life. It was like, it physically made me gag. I was like, I don't know what to like. And I'd never encountered this before with my own wines. So I didn't really know what to do. I freaked out. I thought I'd ruined everything and I left it and it didn't get any better. So just before Christmas that year, coming into next vintage, I just had to basically put a hose in the top, suction it out and pour it down the drain. And this was a wine at the time, early on for me, a wine that I thought was going to like, this was it. This was, going to really change stuff. And I'm just watching it go down the drain. I was like, well, you don't make that mistake again. So we make more skin contact wine than what we have ever done. But I have some pretty, stringent processes around protecting that wine, keeping them safe, getting them into bottle nicely. And it's one of those lessons that, for me at the time, that was a huge deal. If I have 2 barrels now that are no good, whatever, it's okay. It's fine. But at the time as well, I was 27, 28 years old. I was like, like pulling my, hair out thinking, oh, ruined everything. So that was a real, and it was probably about the time that it was like, well, maybe this Delinquente thing is something that I can do with my life. Before that, it was still just like on the side, little side hustle play thing. And I think at that point, it was like, all right, if you're going to do it, you got to get serious. Actually go and try and get some importers, go and try and speak to people, get some export happening, try and do that. And from that moment onwards, it was, it was sort of a turning point for me, I think.
Well, good.
Yeah, I have a question. This is a blend of those 2 grapes. Do you make them? Do you do them separately in bottles? Do you do a Negro Amaro and also a Negro d'Avalo separately as separate bottles?
Yeah. So Nero d'Avola is my favorite grape variety I work with. I use that in 5 or 6 different wines to some degree. So in the Delinquente range, we make a Pet Nat, which is a blend of Vermentino and Nero d'Avola. We do a straight Nero d'Avola rosé called Pretty Boy. In the Hell wines, we do a straight Nero d'Avola, later pick, higher tannin, more structure, time in oak, all that sort of stuff. So Nero d'Avola we play around with in a lot of different ways. Pet Nat, rosé, light red, full-bodied red, the whole gamut. Negro Amaro is a little bit different. We don't have that much Negro Amaro on the vineyard. So the Negro Amaro that goes into this is basically all goes into there. we have another vineyard that we work with that has a little bit of Negro Amaro, and we actually make a Negro Amaro petnat called a Maya. Smaller production, but it's a part of the Delinquente range, and that's really cool. It's like darker, like longer maceration, so dark red petnat. It's got like that lovely sort of bitter aniseedy spiciness to it. It's like Campari soda sort of feel. Really cool.
Yeah, we've featured their Hell Wines as well as a Bizarro on the Case Club after the
cool.
last time we did. Yeah, which we had that. The final question that I have for you is actually has nothing less to do with wine itself, but more of just a trade and what's happening. With the tariffs and everything going on in the States, are you seeing any decrease in demand from your US market, US buyers? Are you seeing, I don't know, your export going down? Not just you, but it's just your neighbors, your friends as well. Yeah, are you seeing any difference?
At the moment, no. To be honest, we're seeing more. We've seen a little bit of a slowdown in Canada because Canadians are only drinking Canadian things now. So like we've seen more of a slowdown in Canada, and it's not huge, but it's more of a slowdown in Canada and feedback on that than we have in the US. At the end of the day, the tariffs in the US are equal for everyone at the moment. And they're equal for everyone at the moment. They domestic, most of the wine that you make in America, you drink in America. That's what you got to remember. You will not see a bottle if you go in Europe or in Australia or in Asia. You don't see American wine, right? You are a self-sufficient country insofar as producing American wine. You drink most of it in America. So I haven't heard or seen anything crazy decrease. If anything, the last 6 months has been awesome for us. I think there was so much like awful uncertainty before the election that I think people have like, maybe they need to drink to like deal with it or whatever it is. But like we've seen really good sales in the last 6 months.
Okay, good.
Obviously when the tariffs came in, it was like, whoa, what's going on? I mean, we got a free trade agreement, like, all this sort of stuff, but it hasn't impacted. I really hope that, obviously you hope that it comes off as soon as possible. I hope that, you sit there and go, oh, well, what if Europe gets 40% and we only have 10%? Is that going to be good for you? It's not, because the importers and the distributors that you work with sell European wines as well as your wines. Mm-hmm. And those companies are going to suffer if they have to charge 40% more for most of what they sell. So it's I mean, my background is I did economics at university. So, I'm and did it in, the mid 2000s, like free trade and, global economy is what I'm all about. I love that. Right. So, I hate to see it, and I don't want to see it impact anyone.
I was just talking to a importer friend of mine, and he was saying something quite interesting where, I mean, it makes complete sense in hindsight, but I didn't think about it, but particularly here in DC market, it's just like that $15 is like the magic break point, right? Like anything below 15 is kind of like, that's your workhorse. It's like, it's what restaurants pour by the glass. This is what keeps the, doors open. It's what keeps the distribution companies going and all of that. But as soon as it goes into the other side of 15, which is where your wine is like, where this wine is landing right here as a wholesale cost, which is like at that point, now you have decisions to make, right? Because like now it's going to move slower. It's less likely that it's going to be like a high volume wine. If it wasn't selling before, it's likely that it's going to get an X. If it was selling well before, then maybe there's a way to kind of think about it. But like we still keep it on. Maybe we take a smaller, we take a hit on the margin, but we'll still push it out. So yeah, I was just curious, like if your pricing strategy has changed in any way to like, in partnership with some of the export or importers from US, or if you've seen them asking you to change your price, or they're just demand going down, or yeah, I'm just curious. So anything's happening.
You're exactly right. Like the pre-COVID and even during COVID, the like early premium end, so that sort of like 15 to 30 landed price was like huge, great. Everyone was willing to spend the money on it. Coming out of that with the inflation and blah blah blah, and then political uncertainty and all that sort of thing, that's the section that's dropped off the most. So people at the higher end, 50 plus landed, $100, $150 bottles.
Yeah.
They're still buying those. They buy those every day of the week. They're no problem. It's the regular consumer that used to go, you know what, I want to try that nice bottle. I'm going to try that. I'm going to pay the extra $10 to try something like that. They're not doing that anymore. So that's why we probably haven't seen any changes for us, because we're, like you said, we're sort of at the top end of the everyday drinking range, which works well. It's pourable for restaurants, etc., etc. But my friends and colleagues in the industry that make those wines, which is most of them for sort of minimal intervention Australian wine, those guys are the ones that have had a harder time over the last 2 years or so, because that $40 retail, turns into like $20, $22 by the glass. That's not working. Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. Well, what's next for you? I mean, you've been at this for, again, you were here 3 years ago. You're back on your 3 years. You're 12th year, on your 12th vintage. Delinquente keeps rolling. You just had a strong last 6 months in this inflation-filled, tariff-ridden economy. It seems like you're going strong. What's in the picture for Cone Greg and Delinquente in next 5 years, 10 years?
I think for Delinquente, I'm at a really comfortable point. I mean, we're not growing Delinquente like we did for the first 10 years. I think the last 2 or 3 years have been like, this is a level of production that I'm happy with, that I'm comfortable with. I think I can keep the quality at the right place, and I can keep everyone satiated without overdoing it, right? So we're very happy with that. I'm not one of those winemakers that likes to sit out on the vineyard on a tractor and be left by myself. I like being out. Almost my favorite part of the job is traveling and selling the wines and talking to customers and doing events and things like this. So I look forward to that a lot. I was lucky I was in the States back in May, working with new distributors in New York, and had an absolute ball down in Carolinas as well, and in California. We're about to do our domestic run here, so I'll be in a different city every week for the next 5 weeks, and then over to Europe after that. So for Delinquente, it's just about making wines, continuing to make wines that I like to drink. Continue to impress myself. If I open a bottle and I'm tasting with someone and I'm like, yeah, this is good, this is great, then that's what I want to continue doing. Where I do put a lot of effort and growth at the moment is in Bizarro. I think I love that product. I love the cans that we make. I love Aperitivo. I love introducing what we do in that space to new people, and I'm really, really enjoying that. And that's where we're growing at the moment. So from a production point of view, Delinquente is really easy. We're very comfortable. But Bizarro is giving me that, that kick of like, okay, we got to make more. How are we going to do that? That sort of side of things. So that's sort of my focus a little bit for the next little while.
Amazing. Well, that's all the questions I have for you, unless any of you folks have any questions for CG last minute. Well, all right. Well, hearing none, thank you for coming on again, CG. I really appreciate it. It's always fun talking to you. You've always been really generous with your time. I know it's like a 10 o'clock over there in your time, but
yeah, perfect for me.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming on. I think I speak on behalf of all of us that we really enjoy having you here, and that, you know, it's always good to learn more about what you do and what you do. So, everyone, I present to you.
I appreciate it. I love, like I said, I love doing this sort of stuff, and it's great to have an engaged group. And it's great to do, like, you know, this is well, I said before, you know, I love the old romance of wine and that connection to something that's, you know, old, and being able to do this sort of stuff is, yeah, I absolutely love it. That we can chat and be, you know, thousands of miles apart is really, really cool. I love communicating and talking about what we do. And to be able to do that with you guys from the other side of the world is fantastic. So I appreciate it.
Amazing. Come Greg of Delinquente, everyone.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, one more thing. I think you would find this interesting and amusing, actually. So we do this at the end of each call, which is, so first of all, usually I wrap it up with a guest speaker, some like quick fire questions, but you've already gone through these rounds last time, so I'm gonna let that go. But what I usually do is I ask everybody how much they think this wine costs on a retail shelf and how much they would be happy paying for this on a retail shelf. And I'd be curious, I think you would find this amusing to see what people think of your wine should, what they think will cost. So let's play this game, everyone. How much do you think this wine is on a retail shelf? And how much would you be happy paying for this on a retail shelf? You can use this as another data point for your wine.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, obviously, you know, this is a little different because this is a landed cost here in US. So there's a importer's markup and, you know, all of that, my markup and all of that thrown in there. But in general. All right. So 25, 25, 25, 28, 18, 26, 20, 25, 27, 23, 25, 20, 25. So you guys are all kind of in the ballpark. So this wine on the retail shelf would be, Charles, you got around the dot, $27. So yeah. So there you go. CG, you can take it as a data point. Do what you will with that data.
It's perfect. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. That's where we need to be.
Yeah. But you know, everybody's right around basically where this is priced. So excellent.
Excellent.
Well, that is pretty much everything that I have for you, unless you guys have any questions. You are more than welcome to hang out if you want. It's up to you, CG, but I don't want to hold you any longer than I have to. So
I've got a bit of I don't know if you can see a bit of stuff behind me. I've got to start cleaning some IBCs. We're doing we're canning some pet nat.
Nice.
Next week. So I'm gonna clean some tanks and get that out to the canning line today and get all that ready. So I'll leave you guys to it.
Again,
excellent.
Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Next time you are ever in DC in the market, or also actually, I split time between South Carolina and DC now. So if you're ever
Okay, cool.
or Carolina market, let me know. I'd love to come meet
We'll
you in person.
We'll do. Absolutely. Yeah, pleasure. All right. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
All right, brother.
Cheers.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, there it was. We haven't done one of those in a while. I'm gonna
That was fun. Yeah, it's been a minute.